Chosen one. The moment the sick truth surfaced, everything changed. Now they're drowning in guilt because no one ever asked your side of the story. You were never the problem, you were the evidence. Now the truth is out, and guilt is eating them alive. Now, they didn't silence you for protection, they silenced you to preserve an illusion, and that illusion, it's their entire identity. Think about it. Every time you tried to speak, what happened? They talked over your words, they twisted your meanings, they made you feel insane for even trying. That wasn't emotion, that was strategy. Cold, calculated, premeditated narrative control. Because here's what you didn't see then, but you're seeing now. The moment your truth touches air, their whole house of cards collapses. They built their reputation on one thing, being the good one, the reasonable one, the one who tried so hard with you, and your story proves that was all performance. But here's what's coming, that terrifies them. You staying silent actually made them look more guilty. Your absence from the narrative created a void, and in that void, people started wondering, why isn't there another side to this story? Why does this person look so desperate to control what's being said? Why does defensiveness appear when your name comes up? Your silence wasn't weakness. It was a time bomb they thought they'd defused, but it's been ticking this whole time. They made a critical miscalculation. They interpreted your silence as being done, as having moved on, as having accepted their version of events and faded quietly into the background. But silence and surrender are two completely different things. Silence can be strategic. Silence can be preparation. Silence can be the calm before a truth storm no one saw coming. And while they were busy celebrating what looked like their victory, you were actually just gathering yourself, learning, growing, understanding the full scope of what happened. And that understanding, that's what they should have feared most. Because once you understand the game, you can't be played again. Once you see the pattern, you become dangerous to everyone still running it. Here's what really happened with your side of the story. Nobody asked because they told people not to. Not explicitly, but through the subtle art of social manipulation. They created an environment where asking about you felt like betrayal to them, where curiosity about your perspective was treated as disloyalty, where anyone who questioned the narrative was gently redirected, subtly ostracized, or quietly warned. They built an invisible fence around the truth, and most people don't even realize what keeps them inside it. This is how they control narratives in groups. You don't ban questions, you make questioning uncomfortable. You don't silence dissent, you make dissent socially costly. And you definitely don't stop people from seeking other perspectives. You just make sure seeking those perspectives feels wrong somehow, disloyal, dramatic, unnecessary, and most people will stay within those invisible boundaries rather than risk the social consequences of crossing them. That's not accident, that's architecture. They built a system where your side of the story became unspeakable without anyone having to explicitly forbid it. Systems built on social pressure are only as strong as the pressure itself, and pressure has to be maintained. The moment they stop managing the narrative, the moment they let their guard down, the moment they get comfortable thinking it's over, that's when the cracks appear. That's when someone finally asks the question they've been afraid to ask. That's when curiosity overcomes social programming. And that question, that single moment of genuine inquiry, it's like pulling one card from a house of cards. Everything wobbles, everything becomes unstable, everything threatens to fall. You were the villain in a story they wrote out of convenience, but not just any story. A story they needed for survival. See, they couldn't face what really happened. They couldn't sit with the reality of their own actions. So they did what cowards do. They made you the antagonist, the problem, the one who couldn't let things go. And people believed it, not because it was true, but because it was easier than asking questions. But here's what's building beneath the surface. Here's the pattern emerging. Every person who villainizes you to others is really just pre-defending themselves. They're getting ahead of the story. They're planting seeds of doubt about you before you can plant seeds of truth about them. They labeled you too emotional, too dramatic, too bitter, all labels designed to discredit anything you might say later. That's not random character assassination, that's strategic reputation management. And the sicker truth, they probably learned this tactic from experience, which means you're not the first person they've done this to. You're just the one who's starting to see the pattern. Think about the precision of it, how they used certain words, how they told certain stories, how they emphasized certain details. That kind of character assassination doesn't happen accidentally. It's practiced, refined, perfected over time, and that should tell you something crucial about who you were dealing with. This wasn't someone who made mistakes in the heat of emotion. This was someone who calculated every move, every word, every story, all designed to ensure that if you ever spoke up, no one would believe you. That's not the behavior of someone who made an error in judgment. That's the behavior of someone who knew exactly what was happening and planned their exit strategy before even starting. Their guilt has nothing to do with you. That's the part people miss. They're not staying up crushed by the weight of how they hurt you. They're not reliving the damage or wishing they could take it back. What really haunts them is what their actions revealed about who they really are. Their guilt is self-centered. It's not rooted in empathy. It's pure self-preservation instinct. What eats them alive isn't the pain they caused you. It's the possibility that someone might find out who they really are. Watch what happens when your name comes up. The defensiveness, the over-explaining, the weird little comments designed to keep their version alive. That's not someone who's moved on. That's someone maintaining a cover story. And maintaining a cover story is exhausting. The truth is leaking, not because you're talking, but because guilt leaks. It seeps through their perfect facades in ways they can't control. The tension when someone asks about the past, the way they change subjects just a little too quickly, the overcompensation, the performance of being healed, all of it screams one thing: they know what they did, and they're terrified someone else will figure it out too. The guilt they're carrying isn't clean. It's not the kind that leads to apology or amends. It's the toxic kind, the kind that festers, the kind that makes them resent you even more for making them feel it. Because in their twisted thinking, if you had just stayed silent, if you had just accepted their version, if you had just disappeared quietly, they wouldn't have to feel this way. So in a sick sense, they blame you for their guilt. They blame you for existing as a reminder of what they did. They blame you for not making it easier on them by vanishing completely. This is what happens when someone values image more than integrity. The guilt doesn't inspire change. It inspires resentment. Resentment toward the person who represents their failure. And that resentment makes them double down on the lies, makes them commit even harder to the false narrative, because admitting the truth now would mean admitting they've been lying all along, would mean admitting the guilt was valid, would mean facing not just what they did, but who they became in the process of covering it up. If you felt the truth in these words, hype this video so more chosen ones like you can see it. But guilt has a funny way of eating people from the inside. You can see it if you know what to look for. It's in their eyes, the way they can't quite hold eye contact when certain topics come up. It's in their body language, the way tension appears when your name gets mentioned. It's in their speech patterns, the way they rush through explanations that should be simple, the way they over-explain details when no explanation is needed, the way they defend themselves against questions nobody asked. All of it points to one thing: they're carrying something heavy, and that weight is your untold story pressing against their chest every single day. What makes this particularly devastating for them is that nobody asked your side. If someone had asked and you'd told your story, at least they'd know what they're defending against. At least they'd know what version of events is out there, but nobody asking. That means your story exists in potential, in possibility, in the unknown, and the unknown is always more terrifying than the known, because they don't know what you might say, they don't know what details you remember, they don't know what evidence you might have kept, they don't know who you might talk to or when. That uncertainty is a special kind of torture, one they inflicted on themselves by making sure nobody asked in the first place. They didn't love you. They loved the idea of you broken. It made them look like saviors. Pay attention to this. They didn't want you healed. They wanted you grateful. There's a massive difference. As long as you stayed broken, they got to be the hero of the story, the patient one, the one who stuck around, the selfless martyr who tried so hard. But the second you started reclaiming your power, the second you stopped needing them, the dynamic shifted and they panicked, because now they couldn't use your brokenness to elevate themselves. Your healing exposed that they were never helping, they were feeding. Everything they did had a dual purpose. Publicly it looked like support. Privately it was control. Publicly it looked like patience. Privately it was conditioning you to stay small. They needed you beneath them so they could feel above you. That's not love. That's not friendship. That's parasitic. And the moment you figured that out and stepped away, they had to flip the script fast. They had to make your boundary look like betrayal. They had to make your healing look like abandonment. Because if people knew the real reason you left, their savior image shatters completely. You stepped back to protect yourself, to breathe, to heal, and they took that natural human boundary and turned it into evidence against you. They told people you disappeared, that you cut people off, that you changed, as if your absence wasn't a direct result of their behavior, as if you vanishing wasn't the predictable outcome of being repeatedly dismissed, gaslit and betrayed. They weaponized your silence because your silence was the last thing they could control, and they knew that if you ever broke that silence with truth, game over. Your absence created curiosity. People started wondering, why did this person really leave? What happened that we're not being told? Your silence made their story sound incomplete, and incomplete stories make people suspicious, especially when the storyteller gets defensive about filling in the gaps. So while they thought they were using your absence as a weapon against you, they were actually creating the exact condition that makes people start asking questions. That's the irony they're living with right now, and it's eating them alive. Your untold story has become a presence in the room even when you're not there. It hovers, it lingers, it creates questions they can't fully answer, and every time they try to fill in your side of things, every time they speak for you, they dig themselves deeper. Because people can tell when someone's narrating another person's experience. They can hear the artificiality, the assumptions, the projection. Real voices have texture, authenticity has weight, and when someone tries to ventriloquize your experience, it always sounds slightly off, slightly manufactured, slightly too convenient for their version of events. This is why they fear your voice so much, not because of what you might say, but because of how different it will sound from what they've been saying on your behalf. The contrast alone will be damning. People will hear your actual voice and realize how much they've been listening to an imitation, how much they've been fed a performance instead of being given access to the real thing. And that realization changes everything. It makes people question not just the content, but the entire structure of the narrative they've been accepting. They know they got away with something, but they also know that getting away with something isn't the same as being innocent. And the weight of carrying that knowledge, of maintaining that deception, of living inside that lie, it corrodes everything. Every interaction becomes a performance. Every conversation becomes a minefield. Every connection becomes conditional on people not knowing the truth. That's not freedom. That's a prison they built for themselves. And you hold the key without even trying. They didn't destroy you because you were too much. They destroyed you because you were too real. Your depth exposed their shallowness. Your honesty exposed their performance. Your questions exposed the things they were hiding. And instead of rising to meet you, instead of being honest about not being equipped for real connection, they attacked. Before anyone could see clearly what you brought to the table, they threw dirt on it. Before anyone could witness your light, they tried to dim it. Before anyone could hear your truth, they discredited you. This is preemptive destruction, and here's why it matters. People only destroy what they fear. People only attack what threatens them. And you, chosen one, you threatened the entire illusion they'd built, not because you tried to, but because your mere presence demanded authenticity they couldn't provide, so they had a choice: admit they weren't ready for something real, or destroy the person asking for it. They chose destruction, and that choice is about to cost them everything, because here's what's coming. You survived their destruction, and survival is proof that everything they said about you being too weak, too broken, too damaged was a lie. You weren't a random moment in their life. You were the test, not the kind with clear instructions and neat answers, the kind that reveals character in raw, ugly ways. Life dropped you into their world, not to tear them down, but to see what they'd do when faced with something real, something that couldn't be manipulated or faked. And they failed spectacularly. You didn't demand too much. You just required honesty, consistency, presence, the bare minimum of emotional integrity. But even that was too much for them. Instead of rising to meet you, they panicked, they lied, they ghosted, they twisted, they blamed, they ran the second things got real, because real was never what they were built for. They thrived in shallow waters, and you showed up with oceans. They didn't drown because you were deep. They drowned because they never learned how to swim in truth. You were never a punishment. You were a mirror, a measuring stick, a moment of choice. They could have evolved, but they chose comfort. They could have listened, but they chose control. And now, with the story played back in hindsight, their choices speak louder than anything they ever said. Because when it mattered, when it really mattered, they folded. The test wasn't about perfection. It was about presence, about being real when things got messy, about showing up even when it's uncomfortable. They didn't have to be flawless. They just had to be genuine. But they chose fake smiles, weak excuses, and exits disguised as boundaries. So no, you weren't the one who failed. You were the test, and you did exactly what you were meant to do: reveal what couldn't be faked. Your story didn't die, it just got buried alive. And this is where their fear lives. They thought if they denied it long enough, if they rewrote it convincingly enough, if they repeated their version enough times, your story would disappear. But that's not how truth works. Truth doesn't die, it doesn't fade, it waits. And while it's waiting, it grows stronger. Your story has been underground this whole time, not dead, germinating, growing roots, building pressure, and pressure always finds cracks. It's showing up in the way they hesitate when your name gets mentioned, in the details they have to remember to lie about, in the tension they carry that they can't explain, every time someone from the past resurfaces, every time a mutual connection asks about you, every time they have to retell their version. It gets harder. The story sounds more rehearsed. The details feel more manufactured, and they can feel it, the ground shifting beneath their lies. Your buried story is like something they thought they hid well enough. But some things have a way of surfacing, of being found, of telling tales even in decay. And the longer they've maintained the lie, the worse it's going to look when the truth comes out. Because it's not just about what they did anymore. It's about the sustained effort to hide it. Silence doesn't equal absence. Just because nobody asked your side doesn't mean your side doesn't exist. It exists in potential, in possibility, in the space between what was said and what was experienced. And that space, that's where their nightmare lives, because they can control what they say, they can manage what others say, but they can't control what you know, they can't manage what you remember, they can't spin what you experienced firsthand. Your untold story has become more powerful precisely because it remained untold. Had you spoken immediately, while emotions were high, while details were fresh but context was missing, they could have dismissed it as reactionary, as emotional, as a situation where both sides have merit. But your silence let time do something remarkable. It let patterns emerge. It let their behavior speak for itself. It let other people have their own experiences that mirror yours. And now your story isn't just about what happened between you and them. It's about what they are, who they've always been, what they do when nobody's watching. That's what makes your eventual voice so devastating. It's not anger. It's not revenge. It's pattern recognition. It's context provision. It's the missing piece that makes everything else make sense. And when that piece drops into place, the whole picture shifts. Suddenly their victim narrative looks like manipulation. Their growth story looks like performance. Their healing journey looks like an escape from accountability, all because your side wasn't there to counterbalance their fiction. Until now. I must interrupt this transmission for just a moment. Are you really chosen? Prove it. It's easy to watch videos about chosen ones. It's another thing to put yourself to the test. If you're still here, that means something, but talk is cheap. Real chosen ones take action. That's why I built Destiny Engine. It generates personalized sequences that help you rewire betrayal into transcendence, turn isolation into sacred power, and transform their downfall into your rise. We are using the Dark Elite's own weapons against them, taking their declassified consciousness technology that programmed competition and scarcity and repurposing it to serve divine justice. Rodel, the beauty is, you don't even have to lift a finger. You put on the headphones, press play and watch your enemies choke on the rope their own lies created. If you're done consuming and ready to prove you're chosen, start your Destiny Engine for $1 today. Join the Obsidian Inner Order live checks and watch divine justice accelerate in your life. Link in the description. Their entire current image was built on one foundation, the story of what happened with you. They used your collapse as proof of their strength, your silence as proof of their righteousness, your absence as proof of their righteousness, your absence as proof of their patience. Everything they are now, everything people admire about them, it's all built on a lie about you, which means when that lie collapses, so does everything they've built on top of it. Their reputation, their credibility, their identity, all of it is sitting on a foundation of sand, and you are the wave that's about to hit. Every piece we've talked about is connected. The silencing, the villainizing, the guilt, the weaponized absence, the preemptive destruction, the failed test, the buried story, all of it was designed to protect one thing, the false reputation they built, and that reputation has an expiration date. Because lies are hollow, they look solid from the outside but they're empty underneath, and hollow things crack under pressure. The pressure's building right now. Can you feel it? They can. That's why they can't let it go. That's why they're still talking about you after all this time. That's why your name still makes them defensive. Because they know the truth is coming. They just don't know when. They don't fear your voice because it's loud. They fear it because it's true. And this is your weapon. They don't fear your voice because it's loud. They fear it because it's true. And this is your weapon, the one you didn't even know you had. Your voice carries something their lies can't compete with. Authenticity, weight, the unmistakable resonance of lived experience. You don't have to yell, you don't have to perform, you just have to speak plainly about what happened. And when you do, something in people recognizes it, even if they don't want to. even if it makes them uncomfortable. Truth vibrates at a frequency lies can't touch, and they know this. That's why they tried so hard to discredit you before you could speak. That's why they painted you as emotional, unstable, bitter, all preemptive strikes designed to make people doubt you if you ever opened your mouth. The harder they tried to make you look unreliable, the more suspicious their desperation looks. People aren't stupid. When someone works that hard to discredit another person, it raises questions. What are they so afraid of? What are they trying to hide? Your silence combined with their over-explaining has created the perfect storm. The reason your voice terrifies them isn't just about content. It's about timing. It's about the fact that nobody asked, because that detail alone changes the entire dynamic. If people had asked and you'd refused to speak, they could have spun that as you having something to hide. But nobody asking, that reveals something else entirely. It reveals that they created an environment where asking felt forbidden, where seeking your perspective felt like disloyalty, where they controlled the narrative so tightly that curiosity itself became a transgression. And when you eventually speak, when your voice finally enters the space, it won't just be your words people hear. It'll be the sound of their control breaking, the sound of their invisible fence coming down, the sound of permission being granted to question what everyone was told not to question. Your voice becomes more than your story. It becomes the crack in the dam, the first domino, the permission slip for everyone else who sensed something was off but didn't know if they were allowed to say it. This is why they're dying of guilt right now, not because they hurt you, but because they know what happens when that dam breaks, when that domino falls, when that permission gets granted. Everything they've built, every connection they've maintained, every reputation they've crafted, all of it depends on people never hearing your side, never comparing notes, never connecting dots. Your voice isn't dangerous because it's loud. It's dangerous because it's the catalyst for collective realization, the moment when everyone who doubted their own perception suddenly finds validation in yours. You weren't just an inconvenience. You were a reflection they couldn't handle. Every time they looked at you, they saw who they really were beneath the mask, and that vision was unbearable. So they didn't just walk away. They smashed the mirror. They destroyed the evidence. They made sure no one else could see what you showed them, because if anyone else saw it, if anyone else understood what you represented, their whole carefully constructed identity would shatter. You can shatter the glass, but you can't destroy the reflection. It just multiplies. It fragments into thousands of pieces, each shard still showing the truth. You standing here right now, having survived everything they did to you, that's proof, living proof that their narrative was false. They said you were too weak, but you're still here. They said you were too damaged, but you healed. They said you couldn't handle reality, but you faced it while they ran. Every day you live in your truth is another crack in their lie, and the cracks are spreading faster now, faster than they can control. What makes you dangerous now isn't anger, it's clarity. You see exactly what happened, you understand exactly why, and that understanding strips away all their power. They relied on you being confused, hurt, doubting yourself, questioning your perception, but you're not confused anymore. You're not doubting anymore. You've put all the pieces together, and you see the full picture, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. That clarity is like a superpower they have no defense against, because you're not operating from emotion anymore. You're operating from knowledge, cold, hard, undeniable knowledge of who they are and what they did, and knowledge is power they can never take back. The beauty of your position right now is that you don't need anything from them anymore. Not acknowledgement, not apology, not validation, not even their fear. You have something far more valuable. You have peace that comes from knowing your truth, from living in alignment with what actually happened, rather than what was convenient to believe. That peace is unshakable. It doesn't depend on them ever admitting anything. It doesn't hinge on public vindication. It doesn't require witnesses or validation or proof beyond what you already know in your bones. This is the final form of power, the kind that exists independent of external circumstances, the kind that can't be taken away because it was never given by anyone else. You built this power in the dark, in the silence, in the moments they thought they'd broken you. Every time they expected you to collapse and you stood instead, you were building this power. Every time they waited for you to lash out and you chose peace instead, you were building this power. Every time they hoped you'd obsess over revenge and you focused on healing instead, you were building this power. And now that power is complete. It's solid. It's yours. And there's nothing they can do about it, except watch from a distance as you live the life they tried to convince everyone you couldn't have. As you succeed in ways they predicted you'd fail. As you find peace in places they swore you'd find only chaos. Your existence becomes the ultimate contradiction to their narrative. And contradictions can't be explained away forever. Eventually people notice. Eventually patterns emerge. Eventually the question gets asked, what really happened? What's the other side of this story? Why was this person written off so completely, and yet they're thriving? Why does the official version sound so rehearsed? Why does asking about it feel forbidden? Why does curiosity feel like betrayal? These questions build like pressure behind a dam, and dams don't hold forever, especially when they're built on lies. Especially when the architect of the dam is also the one trying desperately to maintain it while living inside it, while pretending it doesn't exist. That's too many roles for one person to play. Something has to give. And when it does, the flood is inevitable. Your untold story is that flood waiting to happen, not because you're planning to unleash it, but because truth has its own timeline, its own momentum, its own way of surfacing exactly when it needs to, and you've become patient enough to trust that timing, wise enough to know that forcing it would diminish its impact, strong enough to let it unfold naturally while you live your life completely free of the need for it to happen at all. That's mastery. That's transcendence. That's the final evolution of someone who was once gaslighted, buried, erased and vilified. You became someone who needs none of it to be corrected to know your worth, but you also know that correction is coming anyway, not because you need it, but because truth needs it, because reality needs it, because the universe has a way of balancing scales that appear permanently tilted. So what happens now? Now you keep living, keep thriving, keep being the walking contradiction to the lies they told. Keep showing up in your full authentic power while they're still trapped in performance. Keep choosing peace while they're consumed by the fear of exposure. Keep being free while they're imprisoned by their own deception. That's not revenge. That's not even justice. That's just natural consequence. The consequence of choosing truth over image, reality over performance, integrity over approval, and consequences, whether positive or negative, always catch up eventually. You're experiencing the positive consequences of your choices. They're beginning to experience the negative consequences of theirs, and nobody had to orchestrate it. It's just cause and effect, playing out exactly as it always does. Think about what you've accomplished that they said you couldn't. You stood up when they said you'd crumble. You spoke your truth when they said no one would believe you. You healed yourself when they said you were too broken. You found peace when they said you'd stay bitter. Every prediction they made about your downfall became evidence of your strength. Every weakness they claimed you had became a superpower you developed. Every way they tried to define you became a prison you escaped. And now you stand here, free, clear, powerful, while they're still stuck in the same lies, still performing the same character, still afraid of the same truth. That's the difference between someone who faces reality and someone who runs from it. You faced everything, the pain, the betrayal, the gaslighting, the isolation, all of it, and you didn't just survive it. You transformed it into wisdom, into strength, into clarity that cuts through deception like a knife. Meanwhile, they're still running, still hiding, still maintaining the same exhausting performance, and performances have a shelf life. Eventually, the audience gets bored. Eventually, people start asking questions. Eventually, the mask slips, and when it does, you won't be there to see it, because you'll be too busy living the life they said you'd never have. Your untold story is their life sentence, not one you imposed, one they created by making sure nobody ever asked, because now that story exists everywhere and nowhere, in the back of minds, in unanswered questions, in incomplete narratives, in the space between what was said and what was experienced, and that space grows, it expands, it becomes impossible to ignore, until one day someone finally asks the question they should have asked at the beginning, and when they do, everything changes. Not because your story is dramatic, but because it's true, and truth has gravity that pulls everything toward it eventually. You didn't disappear, you outlasted. The story was always yours. They were just extras who forgot their place. And now that the truth is coming out, now that guilt is consuming them, now that their lies are unraveling, you get to watch from a distance, not with bitterness, not with revenge, but with the quiet satisfaction of someone who knows that divine justice is real, that truth always wins, that chosen ones don't need to fight their battles. You just need to stand in your truth and let the universe handle the rest. And it is handling it, right now, in ways you can't see, in ways they can't hide. The sick truth is out, and nothing will ever be the same.